What's up YouTube, it's Selza and I'll be showing you guys how to make a claimable art canvas in Rec Room using CV2. Let's get straight to it. I did want to say that this tutorial will probably be a little bit more complex than the other ones. I would try to slow my pace down and make sure you guys understand what you guys are wiring. So first, we're going to need a button we're going to use to claim our board. Now we want to configure it and change the name of it to claim board. We're going to need an if chip. We're going to need an is valid. We're going to need a player variable. We're going to make sure we configure it and make it synced. It's the same for everybody in the instance. And we're going to get party of player. We're going to get a list contains. We're going to get an equals chip. We're going to get an if chip. We're going to clone that player variable after the if chip. We're going to get a player add role. And a button set text. We're going to need an if player has a role. We're going to need a player show subtitle. We're going to need a string format. And we're going to need another string format right above that one. We're going to need a get player account name. We're going to need a toString. Then we're going to move up a bit and we're going to get an event receiver. We're going to need 3 of these. We're going to configure the first bottom event receiver to room loaded. The next right above it is going to be player left. The event receiver at the top will be update 1 Hertz. Update 1 Hertz means that every second it will send an output. When we come back down to the bottom event receiver, we're going to need an if chip. Another button set text. So I'm going to clone the one from the bottom, bring it up to the right side of this if. I'm going to clone another if chip up right next to this update 1 Hertz event receiver. I'm going to clone an is valid right below this if chip. Clone another if chip. Going to clone the if player has role up to the top. Then I'm going to clone the player add role at the top. I'm going to search up player remove role. I'm going to put it right under player add role. We're going to need a square art canvas and a roll chip. Now that we have all the chips spawned in, we're going to wire things. Now we're going to have the button pressed to the input of the if. Then the condition on the if will go to the is valid. Then the input of the is valid will go to the output of this player variable. And the is valid output will go up to the top of this if right beside the event receiver player left. The then on the first if chip will get wired up to the next if chip. The output of the equals will go to the condition on the if. The player pressed on the output of the button will go to the top value of equals. And the bottom volume equals will go to the output of this player variable. The output of this player variable will go to the input of get party of player. The list party will go to the target on the list contains. And we're going to configure this item to change it to local player. then the result of that list contains will go up to the bottom if right below the is valid. So the else on this if chip will go to the input of the player variable. The output of the player variable will go to the input of player add role. The output of player add role will go to the input of the button set text. The target input on the button set text will go to the output on the circuit board of the button. The same output on the circuit board will go up to the button set text target at the top. The then on the if chip after the equals, go to the input of player variable, and we're going to click wire on here and it will change it to invalid. Then the output of this player variable will go up to button set text, as well as this room loaded event receiver will go to this input of button set text, and player left will go to the input of this if, while the else goes to the input of the button set text. We're going to hit wire on this text and we're going to type in claim board. The purple value on the player add role. For this tutorial, I'll name it board 1, and the button set text will be the top output on the string format. Then after I wire that string format, I'm going to configure it and I'm going to add an input to have another value. Then I'm going to wire the output of this toString to the bottom value on the string format. Then the input of the toString will go down to this player variable input. The get player account name output will go to the first input on the string format, as well as first value on the other string format. So now on both string formats, on the top one, we're going to change that message to @brace 0. We're going to close the brace off, then space, and we're going to change it to party, or you can just keep it as an @name. But the reason why I'm putting brace 0 brace is because that's how you detect an index in string format. For this top string format, we're only going to need one value, so you can go ahead and configure it and click remove input, and then you could delete the toString. It was only there. If you prefer the display name, you can just wire this result to the toString here, or you can use the account name and you wire that there. But I'm going to use the @name here. Then in the second string format, we're going to wire the result to the show subtitle purple value. Then I'm going to hit wire on the format on the second string format, and I'm going to type in join @brace 0. We're going to close the brace off, then apostrophe S, and then party, and then we're going to put party. So basically this message is saying we're going to join and whoever account name is that local player. The brace 0 brace between the and the apostrophe will display anything that's inside this value. This if chip that's right beside the equals at the bottom, we're going to wire the else to the if player has role. And for now, since I had board 1 as the role, we're going to change that there. Then does not have role gets wired to the player show subtitle input. So if someone doesn't have that role and they click this button, it will display that you have to join @evil's party. So now we're going to come up to the top and we're going to wire up the output of the update 1 hertz to the input of the if. Then we're going to wire the if condition to the output of the is valid. Input of that is valid will go all the way down to this player variable here on the output. This if chip, the then to this input of this if chip, and then the else of that if chip will go to player remove role. If chip that's right below the is valid, the then will go to if player has role, and the else will go to player remove role. And the does not have role will get wired up to the player add role. Then we're going to wire this if player has role, and we're going to change this to board 1, as well as the player add role and player remove role. Now I'm going to configure this role chip, and I'm going to name it the same I did for the role inside of the circuit. So whatever role name you decided to use, you will have to change your role chip to that same exact name. And then you want to configure your square art canvas, and you want to turn on is roles filter enabled, and you want to click roles, and you want to select board 1 or whatever role you selected. So now if I were to spawn in a marker, I will not be able to write on the board. But if I were to claim the board, I can draw on it now. And if I unclaim the board, I'm not able to write on it anymore. And now I'm gonna bring a friend in to test the board. And now since I'm not a part of their party, if I were to draw in here, it will say you don't have access to draw on the surface still. But now if I were to party up, draw on the board, now I can draw on their board. As well as I can erase it. But the second I leave the party, I can't draw on it anymore. But now, say for instance, you wanted multiple art canvases around the room. We can get a reroute to place that anywhere. And we're gonna wire the output of this reroute to any chip that has role inside the name. So if the player has role, the player add role, the output goes to if player has role, and then the output goes to this player add role, and the output goes to the player remove role. Then on the input, we're gonna wire it and type in board 1. Now all these values will say board 1. So now if I wanted multiple, now we're gonna select all of this besides the roll chip because it tends to mess up if you clone roll chips. Now we're gonna look up a roll chip and place it right above the art canvas. We're gonna configure it and name it board 2. And then we're gonna go to this reroute that we cloned over and we're gonna change this to board 2 instead of board 1. So now I should be able to claim the next one. After we change this to board 2, we want to make sure we change the name of our player variable. We could just add a number at the end. I'm gonna go to 3 and I'm gonna hit submit. As well as on the next player variable, I'm gonna change it to player variable 3. If they have different names, then they'll work different systems. But after you have multiple boards, you will come across a problem where you can claim multiple boards at once. We're gonna fix that now. So depending on how many boards you'll have, you have to make one less player has role chips you're gonna have to add. So I'm gonna clone another one. I'm gonna make 3 boards. I'm gonna select everything. I'm gonna clone it. Then I'm gonna change this to board 3. I'm gonna get a roll chip. We're gonna name this board 3 as well. And then I'm going to change the player variable to player variable 4. And player variable 4. So now since I have 3 boards, I will have to make 2 player has roles for each circuit. So if I look up player has role, I have to spawn in 2 of those and get an OR chip. And then we're going to wire the output of the value of player has role to the input of the OR, as well as the bottom input of the OR will go to the other value of the player has role. But if you had more canvases and you needed more player has roles, you will configure this OR and add more inputs. And if you had 5 art canvases, then you would have to have 4 of these player has roles. And since this is the 3rd board, you will need to have the player roles of board 2 and board 1 here. I did forget you're gonna need another if chip here. We're gonna wire the pressed on the first button to the input of the if, the condition to the result of the OR chip, Then we're going to wire this else on this if chip to the input of the next if chip. And this is basically saying if you have board 1 or board 2 claimed, then it sends a false input and the false will run the next circuit. So now it doesn't let me claim it anymore because I have board 1 and board 2 roll. So if I were to come over here and unclaim both of these boards and go back to this third claim board, it will give me the roll now. But now we have to do the same for the next art canvases. So I will have to clone the player has rolls, the OR chip, and the if chip. And we're going to clone it to the next circuit. So now since this is board 2, that's why it's good to name off your roll chips. If the player has board 1 and the player has board 3, now we do the same as we did on the left circuit. We wire press to the if, then the else to the input of if. Now if we have board 3 roll and the board 1 roll, if we don't have any of these rolls, then it will send an output on the else. Now we're going to clone these player has rolls and the OR and the if chip. Same thing as we did the other ones. We wire the pressed on the button to the input of the if, then the else on the if chip input. And now since this is board 1, we want to replace player has roll with board 2. Now this is basically saying if we don't have board 3 or board 2 roll, then send an output to run the circuit. So now we have fixed the problem of being able to claim multiple boards. This was a pretty complex CV2 tutorial, but what I do need to include is that the more art canvases you do, the more circuits you will have to clone. But the only thing that you have to change after you clone the CV2 is the little reroute that has the roll name, and you have to change the roll name on the roll chip. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace. And this is my profile. Subscribe.